I'm not afraid to admit that I drank in the past, right? And I was doing it, a lot of it, to just be socially accepted in this group of individuals that I valued as friends. I now religiously am praying. 6 months was the first time I ever prayed on a mat, ever. I watched a YouTube video.
Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Religion is not as scary as people think it is. It's not as intimidating to walk into the mosque and Friday prayer, even if you don't know how to pray. You should follow the guy who's just follow the words he's saying. So we went to Lebanon in '93, summer of '93, and we got back. My father ended up leaving in October. And on his return flight back from Lebanon to the United States, he had a heart attack right before he boarded the flight and passed away. When I tell people my father passed away, the typical response he gets, I'm so sorry to hear that. And I always say, I'm not.
Oh, for real?
I just loved living with the excuse that I didn't have a father. I loved having that excuse. I lived on that excuse. So
how did you look to your mom's advice to you?
Ali, save your money. It kind of seems a lot more funner to spend it. I still remember the last time my mom ever hit me. And I remember when my mom did it one time, I looked at her, I go, you know this does not hurt anymore. Just stop.
Were there ever moments where you're like, I need my dad right now? Before we start today's episode, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time out of your day and giving this podcast to listen. And I also wanted to remind you that the only way this podcast will ever grow is with your support and with your help. So subscribe to the podcast, like this video, and now let's get the show started.
Welcome aboard Middle East Airlines.
والمتوجهة إلى
طيران الشرق الأوسط يرحب
مدينة القدس العربية.
Hey Ali, how are you?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. So welcome to Not From Here. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
It's a tradition we start the show with first introducing yourself. Like, who is Ali Younes when he looks in the mirror? Who's Ali Younes to Ali Younes?
That's a good one. How often do you ever just look at yourself in the mirror and then question who you are as a person, right?
Right?
From the top of the dome, Ali is a 34-year-old business owner, father to an amazing daughter named Luna, she's 2.5, husband to an amazing wife named Aya, my two biggest blessings on this earth. I am an avid astrophotographer, gamer, and any and all things racing I'm all about. So I just like cars, and I like things that go very, very fast. That's it. That's if I just have to think off the top of the dome, that's who I am.
And how would you describe yourself mentally? Where are you at?
I think I'm in a really good position in life. I would never say that I was ever in a bad position. I think I had an amazing childhood growing up. I was dealt what some people would say are very bad cards, but like any game of poker, you can kind of bluff your way all the way to winning, and I think I did that very, very well. My life is exceptional. I think I wake up every single day and I'm very happy, and I when I wake up to pray in the morning, and I kind of just do it just to make sure that I thank God for everything that I have. Business is amazing, family life is amazing, finances are amazing. I think I'm the one person that you can speak to that doesn't have anything bad to say.
That's beautiful.
I think the world is in a great space, and I'm very happy where I am, and I'm very happy to be here with you, and everything's amazing.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Another tradition is, because this podcast's name is Not From Here, me and you are not from here, right? But how did you end up here? What's the story?
Yeah, it's a very good story. So we'll start off with my parents. So my mother immigrated here when she was 9. And like most families that immigrate, the Dearborn in Michigan was a huge attraction to them because of the auto industry. So my grandfather came over here with, I believe it was 5 children altogether. The majority of the men worked in the auto industry for GM, so a lot of the big 3 companies there, where a lot of the mothers were exceptional stay-at-home mothers that took care of the house and took care of the families, and they all played their roles in life, and they played it beautifully. My father came a little bit after my mother, probably in his, I believe, late teens is when my dad came, and then they had met. So my family's pretty interesting because I believe it was the 3 brothers married 3 sisters, and then my mom was the only one that went outside of the village of Lebanon when she met my dad. So they got married at a pretty young age in Michigan originally. They had my older sister Asya in Michigan, and then we eventually found ourselves moving to Arizona, where I was born. So I was born in Chandler, Arizona. And I lived there for a very, very short period of time. So when people ask me where I'm from, I never really say Arizona. I always say I'm from Dearborn, Michigan. And I'm extremely proud of the fact that I'm from Dearborn, Michigan. I love this community. But we moved back here, where then we had my younger sister, Ainaya, and then my younger brother, Ahmed. So all in all, it was 4 children. Shortly after we all kind of settled in here, we're in the Warrendale, Dearborn area. You're going to get a kick out of this story. My family took a trip to Lebanon. This is 93. And it's the last time that I've been to Lebanon.
In 93.
In 93. I'm going back in October. But that's the first time since 1993 that I would be going to Lebanon. My mom and the 4 of us went to Lebanon. What I thought was just a summer vacation. So my older sister would have been 7. I was 5. Younger sister was 4. Youngest brother would have been 6 months. My brother Ahmed. So we went to Lebanon in 93, summer of 93, and we got back. Had a good time. I have a few vague memories of being a 5-year-old there. Flew back to America, and my father ended up leaving in early October of 93. He spent what I believe was 2 weeks in Lebanon. Traveled around, did his thing. And on the last day he was in Lebanon, you know how it is, the culture. It's like everybody wanted him to go to their house and have some sort of meal.
Yeah.
And to the audience, we're going to say lahminiya, which basically means raw meat, right? So it's a delicacy in Lebanon, It's like meat, what do you call it? Like meat tartare, essentially, right? And that was my dad's favorite dish, lahminiya, anything, kibbeh, frake, anything like that, yeah. So he traveled around on the last day he was in Lebanon. He ate at probably 4 or 5 houses. This is a story that I hear from my uncles all the time. And on his return flight back from Lebanon to the United States, he had a heart attack right before he boarded the flight in Lebanon and passed away.
He was still in Lebanon?
Yeah, he was flying back that day, had a heart attack that day, passed away in Lebanon. This is October 24th of 1993. So now at the age of 33, passed away. I'm 34 now, so put that in perspective.
You're older
I'm older than my dad was before he passed away. So now my dad at the age of 33 had 4 children, established businesses overseas, looked like he was 50 for some reason, because they just, I guess, a lot of stress back in those days. Passed away, Allah yarhamah, gone. So my mom is in America with 4 kids. Never worked a day in her life, by the way.
How does she receive that? How does she receive that?
Phone call. She got a phone call one day.
Like she's expecting him to be back home in a couple hours.
Yeah, she got a phone call. Yeah, that her husband had passed, and now she's in America with 4 kids, oldest being 7, youngest being 6 months. She would have been 27 or 28 years old on her own. Now I say on her own. Keep in mind she has a loving family, an amazing. I had an amazing grandfather. He passed on too, and amazing uncles. Everybody chipped in, but imagine that, right? Imagine the economics of how that would work with 4 kids on your own, not having a full-time job.
Do you have any recollection of how she broke the news to you guys?
See, at the age of 5, I have chosen memories. I don't remember how she specifically did it, but I do remember it was around October. I know the date, but when I was younger, I remember it was during October because she had to fly to Lebanon to bury him, and I remember it was during Halloween. I had to stay at my aunt's house, and she got me a clown suit for Halloween. I didn't want to be a clown suit, and I threw a fit. Now looking back at it, I was a 5-year-old throwing a fit, not knowing that his father had just passed away, and his mom was overseas burying him. Pretty crazy. So I tell the story for this specific reason. When people say everything happens for a reason, I don't know if they always tie those back to stories or events that actually happen in their lives. I do. I'm very I sit in my thoughts all the time, and I'll sit for hours and I'll just think about things. And that's one of the things I think about now, because here's the twist of that story. It wasn't until 2 years ago, so I would have been in my late 30s after my daughter was born, or my early 30s when my daughter was born, that I had asked my mom, why did we go to Lebanon that summer by ourselves, and why did Dad travel after us? That's weird, right? You would think that the dad would go with the kids to help my mom out with children in Lebanon. Come to find out that my dad had went over there by himself to register up for citizenship paperwork because he wanted to move us all back to Lebanon. So now think about that for a second. My entire life here, you just asked me how my life is, and I said it's absolutely amazing. There's nothing I can complain about, nothing. Every piece that I feel like I need in my life is here and exists in front of me. realistically speaking, if my father was still alive, none of those pieces would exist.
Right. You would be in Lebanon.
I'd be in Lebanon. I would never have met my wife. I would have never had my daughter. I would have had a totally different existence. I could have been a totally different person, right?
Right.
Not growing up with the struggles of having to figure things out as a man on your own without having a father figure around things like that. So when people say everything happens for a reason, everything truly happens for a reason, which is one of the reasons that when I tell people my father passed away, the Arabic response is Allah yarhamu, which is a great response. But then the typical response you get is, I'm so sorry to hear that. And I always say, I'm not. I would love to have my dad around, but my dad is in what I believe is a much better place than where we are right now. And I have everything that I have now because of that specific situation.
Wow.
As bad as that sounds, it's given me the life that I have now.
It takes a lot of self-awareness to get to that point. And I wanted to ask, when do you get to that point, right? Because maybe growing up as a teenager, you really needed your dad to be around. There was a lot of stuff that you wanted to do, maybe that you wished you had your father there maybe to guide you, and then he's not around. When do you get to that point where, okay, this actually happened for a reason?
It's definitely not early. I don't think I was blessed with a very mature mentality in like my 20s. The person that I was in my 20s is drastically different than the person I am now.
Are those the bad cards that you saw you were dealt?
The bad cards that's a very good question. I think we can kind of jump into that. Yeah, that would have been those bad cards that I thought was dealt. See, growing up, you could have never told me. I mean, imagine a mother raising 4 kids on her own. Like, think about the expenses of life. It doesn't matter where inflation is today. Life is life. It's an expensive thing, especially with 4 children. You could never have told me growing up that I was poor. You couldn't convince me. Clothes were clean. I didn't know where the clothes came from. It could have been hand-me-downs. It could have been from my aunts, uncles. My mom could have gotten it from one of those cheaper stores. I don't know. But clothes were always clean. Food was always on the table. We always had a roof over our head. And when we needed something, none of the luxuries in life, but when we needed something specific, we got it, right? And I think that's what I mean by the cards I was dealt were bad, but we bluffed our way all the way through the game of poker and we won, right? Everybody else folded. Is because we never really looked at them as bad cards. We just looked at them and said, this is what we were dealt. Let's kind of deal with it. And I took that from my mom. My mom's one of the strongest ladies in the world.
She has to be.
Yeah, she's probably still dealing with a lot of emotional damage. You can only imagine having 4 kids and no husband around at that early age, late 20s. I mean, think about it.
Never worked a day in her life.
Yeah, and I say that, loosely, right?
Oh,
She
yeah.
obviously did probably work a little bit here or there, but like never, she wasn't the bread maker in the household. My father was. But she definitely became that, right? And to have 4 kids grow up never realizing that they didn't have certain things, but we didn't notice that we didn't have them. Like, kids were getting video game sets and we didn't have them, but we never noticed it because she made this environment for us where we didn't think that was something that was important. It's beautiful. Even Christmas presents. I give back every year to a group called the Dearborn Goodfellows, and I give back religiously to them. And the reason I give back to them is I realized this later on in life, that the gifts my mom would get us from Christmas were from them. She could afford to buy the wrapping paper, so she would get the gifts donated and she would wrap them, put them under the tree for us, right? She gave us a great life. I would say later in my teens and my early 20s, I used my situation as an excuse of where I was.
So you understood that your dad wasn't there.
Yeah.
And you used that
As an excuse.
to do what?
To not be the best version of myself.
What does that mean?
That means you think about whether I could have applied myself more in school. Again, knowing where my life is now, I'm extremely happy with it. But back then, I could have been a much better citizen of the world. I could have given back so much more. I could have focused way more on school. I could have given my mom way less trouble. I could have spent way less money. I started making money at an early age, and when you don't have the luxuries growing up, you can either use that and save more and become one of those people that knows how to invest and stretch the dollar, or you can say, I never had it and I'm going to go buy it. I never had it and I'm going to buy as much as I can of it, right? And I would constantly say to myself, well, I can't go to school. I have to work. Why? Because I have to take care of my family. But that wasn't always the case. I had a great sister, my older sister, who also worked and helped provide. My mom was working and helped provide. I played my role, which was the father role, as best as I could. And I would say that I helped the majority of the way through it, but I could have done a lot more. It wasn't until it wasn't until I had my first big career working at a big corporate company downtown where I've always had this natural ability to lead people. And when I first had that first big career downtown and I had to lead large groups of people, you would hear their stories. And that's when I really came to the realization that all of these bad things that happened to people in the past are now just excuses to why they can't get things done today. And I was looking at my team members saying that, but I wasn't looking at myself saying, but I use that excuse all the time.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized that I need to
You never saw it as a problem for yourself. You just saw it as a problem for other people.
And that was a self-realization moment, probably mid-20s.
How, you said you understood that you had an ability to lead people. I'm just going to go based off assumption that you were able to have somewhat of a social group, a group of friends maybe, that you realized you could lead them. But in what way were you leading them? Like, what was that moment where you were like, oh, I can really influence this group of people?
I would say that a lot of that came from, so the group of friends that I had growing up is very different than the group of friends I have now. The group of friends I had growing up probably added fuel to my fire of using excuses as the reason I couldn't move forward in life, because you tend to huddle around people that are exactly like you because it's a comfort thing, right? It's like when you have a group of successful friends, doctors, lawyers. I mean, again, it depends on what you label successful, right? But it could be anything. Mm-hmm. But when you have a group of what you would label as successful, they all tend to be successful. And when you have a group of people that are not as successful, or what you would call, I guess, like hooligans, as like a young age, you go around causing problems and mischief and all that kind of stuff. Those groups tend, like there very rarely was a good apple in a bad bunch of guys. Like a guy that's going to become a doctor when all his friends are out there like egging houses at like 15. Very rarely has that ever happened. So I was in one of those groups in probably my late teens, which kind of influenced a lot of the bad habits that I had. And I was constantly following the people in that group. It wasn't until I started hanging out with, one day I got invited by a friend to another friend's house and met the group of guys that I hang out with now. And we've been together pretty much inseparable for the last, call it 15 years or so.
Was it like a shock when you sat with the new group of guys? Like, because there's contrast there, right? Between the people that you were hanging out with, your old group, and then the new ones that you're with now. So if you left those to now chill with these guys, then there had to be contrast there.
Yeah, the minute I still remember that day like vividly, that we went to who's now one of my good friends' house, and we swam at his pool, and his dad was barbecuing burgers for us, and his mom was serving us, the typical like hummus and all that kind of stuff. And all the guys were there, and I said, do you guys just do this often? They go, yeah, we always hang out at my house, at his house, right? And then his aunts and uncles were there, and they knew the names of every one of the kids, all his friends. So they created this environment where it was just like, wait, hold on a second. This is what I've been missing this whole time. Like trying to do things to look cool versus just actually finding a good group of people that have a common goal. And they were all super smart, great students, all are super successful now, right? Again, what I label as super successful. And that's why I have them around. It's kind of a selfish thing. So to get back to like your question about when did I realize I had an innate ability to lead, it was when just being in that group. Some went off to school, some went off to work corporate jobs, and a few of us went to go work at the same company downtown. And what I realized is the ability I had such an ability to climb the ladder with people. I would sit in a group, and let's just say you and I were working the same job, and we had a leader that would come to you and explain something to you. And typically a new person who's having something explained to them by their boss would say, yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
I got you, people,
Yeah.
because they're too embarrassed to ask for additional help. When everybody else seems to have it,
Yeah.
they don't. They're just going to say, yep, I got it, and the boss walks away. For some reason, I can't ever explain it. I could tell that you didn't have it. And I would then stop what I was doing, and I'd walk over to you, and I would say, okay, did you understand what he just said? No, I didn't. Okay, explain it back to me. Even if they said yes, okay, explain it back to me. No. Let's walk through this again, explain it back to me. And I still even use that now with like my daughter. When she's like having one of her like tantrums, I say, stop, look at me. Are you listening? Yep. I acknowledge that you're listening. Yep. Okay. Now I want you to do 1, 2, 3, explain it back to me. And I have her explain it back. And then you start realizing that all people want is somebody who has their back. And then eventually people will start noticing that. Other leaders will come in and start noticing that this person has this unique ability to teach, coach and teach. That's always been my philosophy of life. And then people naturally gravitate to people who are great coaches and great teachers. And then next thing you know, you have a team built around you. And then over the course of, call it, I think 7 years at that company, I think there was 4 or 5 of us that worked there. I had one of the quickest rises to where I finished before I ended up leaving and opening up my company now. And I think it was because of that reason that I had a unique ability to identify when people were struggling, and I could articulate exactly what they needed and how to fix it. And I made sure that they couldn't get it wrong again. And because of that, people would just naturally gravitate.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. In those early years, you said that you used the bad cards that were dealt as an excuse to do other things that weren't the best. Were there ever specific moments where you're like, I need my dad right now. I wish he was right here. Where there's a problem where you were like, I want him to be here right now. Oh, I need him to be here right now.
I think the answer is no. And I think because I just loved living with the excuse that I didn't have a father. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like, I loved having that excuse. I didn't love not having a father. I want everybody to understand that. When I tell you the story of like all things happen for a reason, I would love to have my dad around, right? But life would be drastically different. Humans tend to do that. You tend to want to always have the backup of, well, it didn't go right for me. And the reason it didn't go right for me was because of this specific thing. When people would ask, man, you're so smart, you're very articulate, you have the ability to explain, why didn't you go like to college and like become this thing, a doctor, a lawyer, like a lot of my friends are, right? And early in my years, I said, people now use the excuse, well, I want to be a business owner. That's why I didn't go to school. School's a waste of investment. Nobody thought that back then. And I still don't think that now. I think school's a great investment. But I would always use the excuse, well, I couldn't. I had to help my mom pay bills. I loved having that excuse. I lived on that excuse. So did I ever think back to the day where like, I wish I had my dad around? Selfishly, no, because I could constantly do that. And I used to love the attention I used to get from not having it. Again, this is just a deep dive into a mind of an early 20-year-old. It's not like, you're right. The fact that someone could reflect on this 10 years later is astonishing in some cases, because I used to love the fact that people would say, like, look at him, he takes care of his family. Look how he helps his mom. And then in the back of my mind now, looking like at 34, I was like, I could have did way more than I did. I remember having the nicest car in my family. I remember always having nice clothes. Now, don't get me wrong, I spoiled my siblings as well, and I spoiled my mom as much as I could. But the amount of money that I spent just on myself that could have went towards something else, could have went towards my mom, or could have went towards like my sisters or my brothers or anyone else, I could have done a lot more than what I did. But I loved every minute of it. I loved it. And looking back at it is probably one of the biggest things that held me back in life, is that I loved having the excuse of something bad happened to me and look where I am now, right?
Yeah. And how did your mom like kind of see that side of you outside the house with those friends in that environment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Arabic parents, they're not gonna just let you do your thing, They're on top of you always. So how did you look to your mom's advice to you, or look to what she was telling you at the time?
I think at the time, her advice to me went in one ear and out the other. Like most kids at that age, your parents say something to you and it doesn't work with your agenda or what you want to accomplish. The really smart kids at that age know that their parents are always going to be looking out for them. Whereas someone like myself at the time just thought to myself, no, this seems a lot more funner to do it this way. I'll just save your money. It kind of seems a lot more funner to spend it, right? Like, you don't need this many pairs of shoes. Yeah, I kind of do. Like, everybody at the office has these shoes. I want these shoes now, right? And it was very difficult for my mom to have any type of control not because she was dependent on me for anything specific. My mom raised 4 kids on her own. If I stopped giving her money to pay the bills, trust me, that woman could figure it out. Like, trust me, bro. She still works to now. She doesn't have to because it's ingrained in her. But I don't think she had the energy that was necessary to reel in an 18, 19-year-old boy with no father. It's difficult, bro. And it's hard for any mom to do that, especially when you don't have the dad to say, hey, I'm going to call your dad if you don't do this, right? There's that fear factor where the mom is like, I still remember the last time my mom ever hit me. And, for the non-Arabic listeners on here, that's a normal thing. Like, and I remember when my mom did it one time, I looked at her, I go, this does not hurt anymore. Like, just stop. Like, hitting me with a shahata slipper is not doing anything at this point.
So you did used to get those.
Oh yeah, we all. I mean, who didn't?
She was frustrated that point.
Yeah, imagine working 12, 13 hours, coming home, and you want your son to do his homework, and he's like, yeah, I did it, and he didn't do it, right? It's very difficult for a mom to in her position to muster the energy to try to do it, or she can just say, well, listen, he's a boy. It is what it is. He's gonna figure it out. She kind of knew that I would figure it out. She kind of knew that I would always be able to provide for myself, build a life for myself. Like, I always had that like mentality I could do it. But God, I wish I would have listened to her a lot more. She's such an intelligent woman. She was so smart beyond her years. If I would have listened to her, I would, I don't know where I would be right now.
Moms tend to be that.
Oh, you have no idea.
Especially single moms.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why when I see, it's hard to identify what a single mom is nowadays, but if anyone ever calls me and says, hey, there's this single mother who has kids that needs like a toaster oven or needs an oven or needs a microwave, I'm usually the first one to jump because I realize how difficult it is for them and how much they have to juggle. And like, let me just take this off your plate because I wish someone would have did this for my mom, right?
Yeah. I can relate to that a lot because my parents got divorced early and we lived with my mom. So, and she's a businesswoman. She had clothes stores in Lebanon. And like everything you're saying right now, I wasn't as bad as as apparently you
I wasn't horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I was good in school and that stuff. But just seeing your mom every day from when the sun comes up to when the sun goes down, she's at work all the time. It's like, you look at her like, man, like, and then you look at other people's moms and they're just chilling. There's a part of you, man, that's like, I want my mom to just sit down and do nothing too. But then you see how like they're crazy efficient, like she'll come, she'll make sure that she has food on the table. She's working, she's taking care of you. Any type of questions you have, any type of problem you're going through, she just does it all. And it's crazy. It's mind boggling how much they can do.
Yeah, if you think of the economics of it, like how? Yeah. Like some people making $10,000 a month can barely afford to a 2-income household with one child can barely afford to make a living. But what you realize is the unnecessary spending and things that we do. Whereas when your back's against the wall, it's very easy to start cutting your expenses and start whittling things down to the bare minimum that you need. Yeah. And she did it beautifully. It was almost artistic.
You said that you never knew you were dealt bad cards. That's how much of a good job she did. She did not make you feel like you were any different than any other kid.
No, we had everything. Again, not the extreme luxuries, but then when we got them, we felt like, wow, this is like a big deal. We had like a tape player back in those days, or you got like a Sega Dreamcast or a Nintendo 64 or something. But she did it beautifully. Could never have told you. And that was, again, one of those things in my early 20s. If I was to tell you the story at 22, it'd be a very different story. We struggled, it was hard growing up. We were on, back in the day, it was called WIC. You had like paper money. We were on WIC and welfare and all that kind of stuff. And I had to step in and I had to help my mom and I had to be the man of the house. Some of that is true. I did. I stepped in. I was the man of the house and I did my thing. But the way I used to tell those stories compared to now, I didn't give her the credit she deserved. And still to this day, what she deserves. I mean, listen, I can still talk to my mom now and realize the emotional damage that she went through. And she's still dealing with even up to
You can
today.
still see it.
Oh, 100%. strongest woman ever, but you can just tell, you can just look at her and just say, she's been through it, right? And that's one of the things where it's like, if I ever could go back in time, I would have just made it a little bit easier for her. Not financially or anything. I just would have listened a little bit more. I would have came home when she asked me to. I would have hung out with a better group of friends like she asked me to. I would have focused more on my schooling like she asked me to. Again, life is beautiful right now. The plan worked, baby. But it just could have done a little bit better with her advice.
Was there a worst day, like a day you look back to and be like, I regret that day?
It's probably a group of things that probably set me on the course that I'm at now. But I will say, if there was ever a day that flipped my mentality to being a lot more of a positive person and look at things differently and want to excel in life as opposed to just living in the status quo and living in my excuses, it was a day that I went to my friend Hassan's house at that pool. Just seeing his family dynamic. Like, think about it. His aunt, who's his dad or his mom's sister, would come to the house and knew the names of every one of his friends. Like, there has to be a close knit group there. That tribe is like that for the aunt to know everybody, yet alone the mom and yet alone just the mom and the dad, right? And just seeing how everybody interacted with each other. I didn't say, oh, this is what a family looks like. I have a great family. I said, okay, this is what like having real solid friends looks like, because the other group that I hung out with before, the only interactions I ever had with their parents were bad ones because we were doing something that we probably shouldn't have been doing. That was probably the day that I switched. Like, if I would have met that group of friends early on in high school, I probably would be a very different person right now, right?
Yeah. So
but again, everything happens for a reason. I'm glad I met him when I met him.
So there's a lot of people right now that could be listening that have a bad group of friends, that maybe they realize they're a bad group of friends and they don't know how to move on to a new group of friends. You did that, right? You had a bad group. You're on to way better friends now. How do you transition between this group that you've been with for a very long time and move on to a new one?
It's going to be difficult to break any bad habit. Think about it almost like a drug. If something makes you feel good and then someone tells you, but it's not good for you, you need to stop. Drugs, candy, people who are overweight, things like that. Like, it's very hard to just cut that out of your life. Any person I speak to now that's a young person, especially at the company that I have now, because I get a lot of like 18, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, people in their early 20s. And I'll finish telling the story and I'll tell you what I think about like the generation that's coming up. But what I tell all of them is, don't worry about the group of people that you're with, because as much as they can influence you, you could also avoid the influence. You could sit down and say to yourself, where do you want to be in the next 5? Where do you want to be in the next 10? What do you want to do for a living?
I'm going to interrupt your episode here real quick to tell you that during recording this episode, I ran into a small audio issue. And this tends to happen sometimes when I'm the person recording, editing, and hosting the actual podcast. The second half of this episode, the audio is a little annoying, but the issue is resolved for the coming episodes. So thank you for staying patient with me and enjoy the show.
Someone who has a set goal that they want to try to achieve, realistic, right? And they have many goals. It's like, my overall goal is to become this person, doctor, lawyer, whatever label you say is successful. Obviously, that's a long track to get there. So you have to have these smaller, achievable goals. It's kind of like the candy as you're going up the road, you take a bite of that candy, you say, okay, I'm going to keep going. Take another bite, I'm going to keep going, right? If someone has a plan for what they want to do, then it doesn't really matter the people that you're around. You will tend to just stick to that plan. And that's where you'll realize that the people that are around you are holding you back from the plan. That's the key. You can stop people from influencing you, but you'll realize that you just don't want them around anymore. You don't want that drug. You don't want that bad thing that's harmful for you. You just say to yourself, oh, now I want to surround people that are like-minded, that also want the same goal to do it with me. That's why people excel at the gym a lot more when they have a partner versus someone they're doing it on their own. Yeah. If that partner is like-minded, you'll be good. You will naturally gravitate towards those type of people. I think the generation that's coming up right now is way more set up for success than we are, and only because of their mentalities. This like ability to grab information off of like social media and the internet, and the way that they've mastered it at a young age. My daughter can go through an iPad at 2. Like at 2 years old, she knows how to navigate through it, right? Think about that. I couldn't do that when I was her age. I barely knew how to use the internet, right? they're so smart. These kids coming out of high school. How often now do you hear about Fortson, Dearborn, Crestwood students going to Ivy League schools? It's like a normal thing nowadays. Yeah. I told this to a buddy of mine. I said, if you graduated with me and you became a doctor, that was a big thing. Now you become a doctor, it's like, okay, yeah. It's still a massive accomplishment, but so many more people are doing it because this younger generation has such an access to information that they are able to, they see all these hyper successful people. They know exactly what they want to be in life. They figure it out very early. There's a lot of social pressure that basically forces them to try to figure it out early, even though they shouldn't have to. But they do. They conform and they figure it out early what they want to do. They set goals for themselves and they go out and they achieve it at a lot faster of a clip than somebody of my generation. Yeah. And I respect the hell out of them.
And another thing that I think gives us an advantage is we have more access to people that are already there, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe at your age, at 18, you couldn't reach out to people. Let's say right now you're in the mortgage industry, right? You couldn't really reach out to the top brokers in your city, yeah. And now it's literally one DM away, and you can have access to all these people. Whatever question you want can be answered, just like that.
Yeah. People say that all the time, and I agree with it 100%. I still don't think, how old are you?
24.
Perfect. I still don't think your generation gets enough credit for actually trying to access that information. Mm. Would I have access to information at your age? I don't know if I had accessibility to it. But I think there has to be credit given to the fact that you are able to access the information you need. You are able to reach out for people for guidance, for help in whatever field that you want to eventually end up in, right? And you actually do it. Because some people would argue that your generation, the early 20s and other, are also very introverted. Mm-hmm. They also keep to themselves. Yeah. They don't want to DM anybody. They don't want to ask for help. Right? That we were the go-getters because we would just go out there and we were working at the age of 14. We didn't care. We'll mop floors at a gas station. I still think, even if you have access to all the tools and the right people and the right information, and you're in the perfect time and place for a life-changing event to become hyper-successful, I still think you actually have to just do it. And that's one of the hardest things ever for people. Mm-hmm. They just leave it till Monday, and Monday never comes.
Yeah. You said that every time you brought up success so far, you said, well, I see as success. Mm-hmm. What do you see as success?
My version of success is very simple. My version of success is to become as wealthy as I can be. Wealth. Okay. Wealth to me is physical, financial dollars,
money,
and knowledge. Those are my two things.
Okay, both.
Okay. I want to become as wealthy as humanly possible while spending the most amount of time with my family and getting as close as I can to God. That's my version of success. Mm-hmm. If any of the wealth, financial, or knowledge interferes with spending time with my family and getting closer to God, I don't count that as, I don't want that wealth. I don't want that money. If I have to, I've gone on this journey for over the past 3 years, I would say, where I now religiously am praying, like on time, and that was the first time ever. Like I've done that. I've done it for probably 6 months now. And 6 months was the first time I ever prayed on a mat, ever. With the words, learned it. I watched a YouTube video. I went to Friday Prayer for the first time like 3 or 4 months ago.
Well, 6 months ago was like almost the beginning of the year.
Beginning last year. Yeah, and I would say it was October, November of last year. Now it feels like, hey, you could go get this deal and make all this money, but you are gonna miss Friday prayer, or I need you have to work really late, and you're not gonna be able to wake up for Fajr prayer in the morning at 4:45. I won't do it. It's not worth it to me. That spiritual wealth to me has become so much more than anything else. So that's my goal. I want the wealth, I want the knowledge, but if it interferes with the family time that I set, or it interferes with my time that I set aside for God, essentially, then I don't want it.
Can we talk about that for a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So you said the journey started 3 years ago.
Yeah.
The spiritual journey. First, what makes it start? What makes it click? So I do have a lot of questions about this.
Yeah.
First, where was this? Because you mentioned we live in a community where, like, the stuff isn't weird, like mosques are around, people pray every day, You're surrounded by Muslims. So where was this?
So I worked corporate America for a long time. I mean, you name it, you name a company, I probably worked there at some point, right? The last company I was at for 7 years. And to move up the ladder in a corporate environment, obviously you have to produce. Whatever the goal is, you have to accomplish it. And you have to exceed everybody else accomplishing it, and you get promoted. But you also have to be likable. You also have to be relatable, right? You also have to be one of, as you know, sorry for all the women that are listening, you also have to be one of the guys, right? Like, I'm not saying women can't go to that level, but you know what I mean. You have to be part of the group. And a lot of that causes you to have to conform. I'm not afraid to admit that I drank in the past, right? That I would go out and you go to parties and you go to all these things. And I was doing it, a lot of it, to just be socially accepted in this group a group of individuals that I valued as friends. I valued. And because of that, I feel like I got promoted pretty quickly because I was part of the group. If anyone was stacking my numbers up against somebody else and we're evenly matched, people just liked me more. Yeah. Right? When I left that organization, and again, the organization was amazing. The people there were amazing. So this has nothing to do with them. I think it's just general, right? When I left, I found myself in this really funky stage where I didn't know if I made the right decision or not. My wife was 3 weeks away from giving birth to our daughter before I quit. Imagine that. Breaking the news to her, say, hey, I'm all set here, and you're giving birth in 3 weeks, and I have no job right now. What are you going to do? I'll figure it out. We have enough money, we saved, we have enough money to live for the next couple of years. We don't have anything to worry about, but it's still a very scary time, right? I think that's where it started. I started looking at things that I was doing in life as, does it benefit me or does it not benefit me? And I was about 240 pounds at the time. I was sleeping 4 hours a day. I worked 17 hours. One of the bigger reasons why I had to get out of the environment was because I knew that when my daughter was born, I would be gone to work before she wakes up, and I would be home after she went to bed. And I didn't want to live a life where I didn't get to see my kid whenever I wanted to see my kid. So then I became self-employed, and I opened up the business with my partner, Joe. And I think that's where it started. I started cutting certain things out of my life, but not because religion said I had to do it. I started cutting it because it didn't fit into my agenda anymore. Yeah. I didn't have to go out with people to be accepted, because now I'm self-employed. Nobody needs to accept me. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. I just have to please myself.
And at that time, you didn't have something at the back of your head telling you, like, maybe you shouldn't do this. No, you don't have to conform to these people.
No, it was nothing like that.
Nothing like that.
It was nothing telling me I didn't have to conform. It was just like, I'm always somewhat of an introvert at heart. I'm like the guy, even in my company, I'm the guy behind the scenes, where nobody really notices me, and I love that. But I just started realizing that when I left my job and then I began this journey of being a mortgage broker like I am now, I put goals on paper of what I wanted to accomplish, and then I just took out everything that would prevent me from accomplishing these things. Okay. And one of them was I needed to, again, I had this cushy lifestyle where I had this X amount of dollars flowing in on basically what was the salary. I was making commission, but like I was so good at it that I knew what I was making every month, right? That I said to myself, okay, what are things I can cut out of my life that I don't need to spend on anymore? Not because I'm not making the same amount of money, because I found success right away when I started, but because now I have a daughter coming in that I don't want to spend money on this. I'd rather just spend it on her, or save it for her for college or whatever the case may be. So the things that in our religion would be deemed as bad, partying, drinking, things like that, those are just added expenses that I needed to remove out of my life because I couldn't justify spending $2,000-$3,000 a month going out and having a good time. Right. It wasn't a good time anymore because I would just think, man, I could spend that on my wife or I could spend that on my daughter. So that was the beginning of that 3-year journey. After I've cut all that out naturally, again, it wasn't for any religious purposes, I am someone who's just hyper obsessive about certain things. My wife will say this all the time. I have more useless knowledge in my mind than you can imagine. Talking about like polar bears or dark matter or anything, things that I shouldn't know, I just know I know things about them. Because when I like fixate on something, I become so hyper obsessive about it that whether it's astrophotography, now I have 4 telescopes in my garage and a camera. Faraz is walking me through how to use my DSLR, right? or it's whether I'm a completionist. When I play video games, I'm obsessed. I want to complete every part of it. I become super obsessive with things. So then religion became into play.
How?
My father-in-law is what you would call hyper-religious.
Okay.
And my father-in-law's brother, Haj Mahmoud, is also like that. And then my barber is also like that. My barber was basically like me, early 20s, probably a lot worse. He says the story the best. But then he's also now hyper-religious. And when I say hyper, I say that in a very respectful way. I mean, like, they live their lives based on the teachings, whether it's Ahlul Bayt or just the book in general, right? The Quran in general. I started noticing all these people in my life that I looked up to they had one common thing, and they were all religious. So in the beginning, it was pretty selfish. It was like, okay, hold on. There's a correlation here. So I became hyper-focused on learning about my religion. I was looking at it through the eyes of a child. I was 31, but I was looking at religion like the eyes of a child. Like it was all so new to me. And then the day that it really flipped, I wrote a book. And the book is called Secrets of Divine Love. And I'm a big reader. I like to physically read on paper, but you have to listen to this as an audiobook because the author so eloquently speaks about when she speaks in her own writing. She took my attention away from fearing God to having a loving relationship with God.
Okay.
And I think that's what set me off. And now I look at religion as love. I look at religion as compassion. Even when I have I had a really difficult thing that happened to me today. Like a really difficult thing, almost had me on the verge of tears. And I said to myself, God forgives everybody. How can I not do that? Yeah. Or if I want to say something negative about somebody, my tongue won't say it anymore because God doesn't judge. How can I judge? And that book just changed my life. And then I started interacting with people. I started going to prayer, and I started realizing that religion is not as scary as people think it is. It's not as intimidating to walk into the mosque on Friday prayer. Even if you don't know how to pray, you should follow the guy the sheikh just follow the words he's saying. Yeah. Mumble them if you have to the first couple times. Be like me, watch a YouTube video and learn how to do it on your own. And then realize you've been doing it wrong for 2 months and someone corrects you. It's beautiful. Yeah. And that's what set me off on that journey.
Is it hard at 30 to be 31? Because now you're working, you're married at that time, your first daughter is almost here, and now you're going on this completely new journey and basically learning religion from the base level. How do you manage it with having to juggle all these parts of your life?
Yeah, it's extremely hard because you set a precedent with the people around you about the person that you are, especially in your early 30s at the time, right? The people that are my friends, even my close group of friends now, those are the people I was going out with. And I still go out with them till today. We still go out and have dinners together. But I set a precedent. So the hardest part about it was saying no to people. Hey, we're going to go do this on Saturday night. No. I would rather sit home with my daughter or my wife. Hey, we're going to go do this specific thing. No, I have to go to the mosque. It's Friday. I have to go to Friday prayer. Let's go here. It's I can't. I have to make it back for duha. I got to make it back for prayer. It's become a staple of my day. And because it's I see people say I go into a room and I meditate for 15 minutes. Well, if you can meditate for 15 minutes, you can pray for 15 minutes. It's the same thing, right? It's like a form of meditation. Right. That was the most difficult thing, is setting a new precedent to the person that I was. And that's when I realized the friends that I have are really the friends that I have, because nobody judged me for it. And nobody ostracized me, or nobody stopped inviting me to things, or they still wanted me around, but they realized that this is just who I am. And to their credit, they're like that too, for the most part, right? Yeah. Again, this is not saying that someone who goes out and enjoys himself on a Saturday night is a bad person. Not what I'm saying at all. It's just that, to me, it just doesn't fit into my agenda anymore, right? Something new fit in my agenda. So it's very difficult to rewrite who you are. You may lose a couple people along the way. You might have relationships that you think were really valuable to you at the time that are no longer relationships because you guys shared a commonality and now you don't share that commonality anymore. But that's a beautiful thing. It's it doesn't mean you can't be friends. It just means that I got to speak to that person on a daily basis. I can go out with them every week. Yeah. There are certain sacrifices you're going to have to make to overall be a better person.
Is there like one piece of, I don't want to call it like one piece of information, but like one thing that you read or you heard about religion specifically, and you were like, wow, where has this been all my life?
There's a mystic, and for those people who don't know, a mystic is essentially somebody who recites not hadiths, but stories of religion throughout the years. So there's a mystic named Rui, and Rui said this story that there was a man walking into a village, right? And this man walks into the village, and he sees a man on the side of the road begging for food. And the man didn't have any food in his pocket. He said, "I'm sorry, I don't have any." Right? He continues to walk, and he sees a woman being beat for saying something back to her husband. And the other men heard, and now she's being beat for saying something like that. Saddened, he continues to walk. Right? He didn't intervene there either. And as he continues to walk, he notices another child on the side of the road, sick, either famished or disease or something. Saddened, the man continues to walk, and he sees a casket, very small, size of a child, being carried to the burial site by a group of people. And he continues to walk in a daze, saddened. And as he walks out of the village, he ends up in a desert, and he's pounding the sand as hard as he can until his fists started to bleed. And he's saying, "Why, God? Why do you allow this to happen?" Which is probably the number one thing that people always use as an excuse about why not go towards God. They say, well, if God was real, why would he allow this to happen to me? Or why would he allow this to happen in general? And this man is just pounding the sand, bleeding from the fist and screaming to God, why do you even allow this to happen? If you are real, like you could literally snap your fingers and change this. And he passes out. And then he has an out-of-body experience where he hears the voice of God. And God said, "I did do something. I created you." And I still get goosebumps when I tell that story. And I still almost tear up when I tell that story. Because when I heard that, it's like, that story has almost like governed my life for the last couple of years. Because now, when anything bad happens around me, or when I notice something that I know isn't right, I say to myself, I'm not just going to wait for somebody to fix it. It's like God created me for a reason. He's given me the success that I have for a reason. He's given me the financials I have for a reason. There's money in my bank account for a reason. If I can give that to somebody who needs it, or if I can volunteer my time, if I can just be walking and I see litter on the floor and I just pick it up myself. God put me here for a reason. I may not ever know what that reason is, but I'm going to keep doing things until I try to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's probably the story that, like, okay.
It gives you a sense of accountability, and it gives you purpose too.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm supposed to do the change.
It's funny, those are probably two things that humans crave more than anything.
Yeah.
Is accountability. They want to be held accountable, and a sense of purpose. If people had those two things, probably be a lot better of a world that we
Do you think people want to be held accountable, or are they just comfortable saying like, oh, it's not my problem?
I think people are uncomfortable being held accountable, but in my world, all the things that I've seen, I would say 100% people want to be held accountable. Especially in like the banking world. Your leader is probably the difference between you being successful and not successful. Natural skill and talent obviously will surpass a lot of things. But if you have two people that are equally talented but have better leadership, the person with better leadership will always be more successful. Even if they don't like the accountability makes them better. Yeah. My accountability is God. That's where I'm at now. And my wife and my daughter. My 2.5-year-old daughter holds me accountable. She's gifted from me. She was gifted to me by God. I can't wake up every day with a bad attitude. I can't not work as hard as I possibly can because she's holding me accountable every day to giving her the lifestyle that my mom gave me. And again, I rewind an hour ago when we first started, I said I grew up with not knowing that I didn't have anything, but I thought I had everything.
Right.
I want her to think she has everything.
Before I get to how your daughter changed your look on life, how did your wife, like how big of a role did she have in this journey of change that you had very recently?
Yeah. This is coming from somebody who never wanted to be married. I wanted to live like a single man's lifestyle. I wanted to make as much money as I can. I wanted to travel extensively. And I thought that being married would hold me back from doing the things that I want to do. My wife showed me that I could do everything that I wanted to do, and it would be a lot more, I would feel more accomplished doing it with somebody alongside me every single day. Aya is probably the most supportive person in the journey that I've been, because she's taking the journey with me.
Yeah.
Right?
She's been through all the phases.
Yeah. Now, she also grew up in a very religious household. My father-in-law, Hajj Harry. Harry's the man, by the way. Everyone should meet Harry. But she grew up in a very religious household, right? So she's been through it. And then she would even tell you she took a step back from it. And it fit into her lifestyle, right? And then seeing me become, when I say hyper obsessive, I'm not going around judging people and saying that's haram. I don't do any of that. I keep my religious views to myself. But what I mean by hyper obsessive, like me researching and looking at religion through the eyes of a child and wanting to soak up as much information as I can, researching whether things are right or wrong, or like just because I hear one thing doesn't mean it's actually true. Let me go verify that with sources. And then all of a sudden she's now taking the journey with me. Like her and I, like she's done the other like her whole life. This is the first year I've ever done it.
This year?
Yeah. First year I've ever done it. And she did it alongside me. She was like, well, we're in two separate rooms, but like we both did it together, right? So she supported me on this journey, because I'll be honest, if she didn't support me on this journey, then I don't know if I would still be on it. I think it would be like, you know, I don't get to hang out with these certain friends anymore or do these certain things, and now all of a sudden, like, my wife is kind of like not there with me either. It's like, okay, you know, do I want to do this or not? But the fact that she's pushed me and she says simple things that a 34-year-old doesn't hear very often, which is, I'm proud of you. We don't get that anymore. I mean, how often does even a 24-year-old say, I'm proud of you? So she's definitely been a huge proponent of that. She's done nothing but make my life a lot better. She's done nothing but slow me down. And I mean that in a very good way. I'm a lot more patient. I'm a way better man because of her. And I think I treat her as good as I treat her because I value her way more than she thinks I probably value her. I wish I probably should show it a lot more.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
How's your daughter changed?
Everything, dude. Everything. We can be here for what time is it? I can talk about Luna. I can talk about Luna for the next hour and a half, which I don't want to do.
Briefly.
Yeah, Luna has taught me that being a parent is the greatest thing in the world. Like, God gifted us the ability to have children. The fact that I ever said in my life that I don't want to get married, even after, you know, my wife married me knowing that I don't have kids.
Oh, for real?
Oh, yeah. But she's so, like, hard-headed and, like, strong, and she's like, I can convince you.
Yeah.
And she did. She convinced me. So, you know, the biggest blessing you ever have as a child, because it gives you that sense of purpose. Now I have that purpose. Yeah. I've always had it. But I, as a grown woman, if I can't pay the bills, she's you know, she works in the dentistry. She can figure it out, right? Like, but like, this child physically needs me for something. She can't reach a bowl. I gotta get it, right? She can't make her own food. She can't pay her own bill. Like, she can't. She needs her dad. So that sense of purpose I wake up with every single day. You'll never have that if you're not a parent, because yeah, people can hold you accountable, but it's like nobody holds you more accountable than that baby. I fight my wife every morning to who gets to go into the bedroom first and see her, because something about her morning face just like gets me going. Like, I just love it. She's taught me to slow things down, especially with the way that I talk. When you have to talk to a 2.5-year-old who's sensory overloaded all day, any little thing flips their attention, it's difficult to get them to slow down. So you have to speak to them in a certain way. Yeah. And now I become hyper obsessive about the way I speak to my daughter. I've done research on it. I've read books about it, right? So I do certain things to say, look at me. Are you listening? Repeat it back. And now things don't get under my skin anymore, because it's like, if I can deal with a 2.5-year-old who's running around, sensory overload, I got to slow them down, help out my wife as much as I can. It's like, there's nothing in the world that can come at me that is more stressful in a good way. The stress at home is a very good thing. But there's nothing stressful outside that can get at me, because going home is like, you know, I got a million things that I got to do when I get to the house. I love every minute of it. That anything negative that's happening on the outside, it's like, it means it's nothing. It's nothing to me. Yeah.
I think we can end with this question. First, two questions. So first one, what scares you now?
God, these are great questions. I would say not living up to the expectations that I've set for myself and what others expect of me scares the shit out of me. And I had to swear on that one because it really does. I think my wife looks at me a certain way. It's like the rock of the family. He's got it. No matter what happens, Ada's going to figure it out. Obviously, my 2-year-old thinks I'm like the guy, right?
Yeah.
There's nobody but Bubba. But even my partner in business, even like the employees and the team members that I work alongside with every day, even just the community in general, I am very much introverted, right? I like being behind the scenes, but I have to, in the business side, I force myself out there a lot, right? And there are certain expectations. Thank God I hear nothing but good things about me, because actually nobody will ever tell you anything bad to your face, but I hear a lot of good things about me, and it's like those expectations are a very heavy thing to carry on your shoulders. And I have to wake up every single day and have to meet those expectations. It's very stressful. Scares the shit out of me if I don't, because if I don't meet those expectations, it impacts a lot more lives than just myself. And I don't care what happens to me. I can live on tuna and brown rice. I don't care. It's just everybody else.
Yeah.
I gotta make sure that they're good. So that's what scares me.
And that's something that would scare all of us, I feel.
Yeah.
One last question, and I don't like to ask this question, but you speak so passionately about your daughter that, and knowing you probably give a good answer. Let's fast forward 25 years from now, 25 years from now. And Allah Tawal Ba'amrak, one day you're not going to be here around. So let's say in 25 years, Luna finds this video and she's going through a hard time. What do you tell her?
It's powerful, bro. I'm not a very emotional person, but when you talk about my daughter, like I get really emotional. I know what I want to tell her, I'm just trying to get the words out without like getting too choked up. I would hope that at her age, and by what my wife and I are instilling in her now, and the community that we're raising her in. My accountant asked me the other day, are you still thinking about moving? I said, yeah, my wife and I are wrestling with the idea of moving, but where do we go? I said, and he said something to me that was beautiful. He goes, Dearborn's like home base. The pod, you have a lot of immigrants on this show, but I feel like I get the best of both worlds because I grew up in America, but I grew up in a community of Dearborn that gives me the sense of growing up overseas. This is a beautiful community we live in. I have nothing negative to say about Dearborn ever. I hope that the community that she grows up in, and the teachings that I'm going to give her, and the values that her mom is giving her, that she realizes that if she ever goes through anything difficult, that there's always God. There's always God. I don't ever believe that God is ever going to do anything to harm you. Ever. Rewind this entire podcast. How many times have I said things happen for a reason? God did not take my father away. God gave me an excellent life. And to give me that excellent life, he needed an angel by his side. And there's my dad, right? Leaving a great corporate job that paid me a ton of money 3 weeks before my daughter was born. Changed my life in a much more positive way because it helped me find God, right? Leaving that bad group of friends that I was with to now having that good group of friends. God did, like Allah intervened in that situation. There's nothing bad on earth that can happen to you if you have a strong belief in a higher power. And it doesn't matter what, Christian, Catholic, Jews, I don't care if you're someone who believes that there are multiple gods in this world. Pray to one of them, right? I have my beliefs and I respect everybody's for their beliefs. But if she's ever going through a hard time, there's nothing that God cannot solve.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ali.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
having
your
me.
time.
I appreciate it.
Habibi.
You're a good man. That was fun.